We're going to make a bowl using a drape method. You're going to need a slab of clay that you've already rolled out. Here's an example of what a finished one looks like. This one has a wavy edge. You could make it either that or flat. Make sure you have a bowl with no raised foot. In our class, it's this metal bowl. And I have a template here. You don't have to work with that if you don't have one, if you're watching this from home. Make sure you wrap your bowl in plastic. That's super important, or your clay will stick to the bowl and there's no fixing that. So I want to smooth and compress my slab if I haven't already. And then I'm going to trace my template. If you don't have a template, you can always just cut a bigger circle than your piece, or honestly, you could just drape the whole slab, but I find it's easier to work with a already rounded shape. I'm holding this in place, so I use the template as my kind of straight edge. I have this really large slab on the side, so you could save that. So now I'm going to place the bowl in the middle as close as possible. It doesn't have to be totally exact. I'm going to gently turn it over, right? And now I need to basically slowly and gently push this slab down and around. I don't want to get a big fold in one area, so you can see how I'm going around a little at a time to stretch and gently encourage the slab to go around evenly. And so, you know, it's kind of funky looking. That's okay. I have some extra, and I'd rather have extra than not. So keep going until you're pretty much there, and you can now compress and smooth. You're going to get some stretch marks, cracks, and things. That's pretty normal. And then you might still need to readjust like I'm doing here just to reconnect. And then I'm going to do a rough trim, meaning that I'm not going right up to the edge of the bowl. I am leaving a little bit extra clay. So kind of here's what that looks like. I want to use I make a foot ring, so I'm using a banding wheel, and so that allows me, if I've centered my bowl pretty evenly, to mark it out, and then I can score. You could probably also just place something around on top and trace that. And then I need to make my foot. I'm going to use a coil foot, but you could do another shape, right? A foot is just something that's elevating the piece. My coil is about the size of my finger. That's a good general size. I'll trim at least one side, and I need to score this as well. That always has to happen. And then I'm going to add my water and score again on one of these pieces. It could be the bowl like I'm doing, or it could be the coil. And then like I mentioned, a foot doesn't have to be the foot ring. So I could make like 3 or 4 or 5 little kind of spheres, and that would work too. But like, again, I'm just doing a kind of standard ring. I'm going to trim this to fit. So you can see where we're going here. And now I need to blend and smooth my foot ring so that it's got a nice joint. If you have nails, you could use the curved end of this wooden modeling tool. Right, it makes a smaller tool marks, but you can still smooth that. And now I need to adjust and refine the foot. So I'm kind of evening it out. I'm pinching it to make it a little bit more narrow. You could use a barely damp brush instead of your finger if you wanted. And the banding wheel is really helpful because it lets me spin this without messing up the rim. And then I'm going to turn it over and tap it gently to level the foot. And then I need to stamp it. In our class, we're often making bowls for empty bowls, so I'm using an empty bowl stamp here. And now this needs to dry to damp leather hard. You might hair dry it or just let it dry if you have something else going on. And so now I need to refine the rim. I'm using a plastic card or other kind of rib to scrape. And then I could shave down the rough edges with a scoring tool if I have a really kind of raised area. It's uneven. And then I continue to scrape and refine. I might switch to that rubber rib to smooth as it's getting a little bit neater. I'm often kind of removing little bits of clay, so just know that you kind of have to do that. And then I'll eventually switch to my hand or my finger pad. That's like my last smoothing kind of step. So you can see this is starting to take shape, become a little more refined. And you could smooth a little bit with a barely damp sponge. So if I squeeze it, there's no water. I have to be careful because if I smooth too much with a sponge, I actually take away the fine particles and get a rough result. So I can smooth a little inside, but again, it's just barely. Kind of like a last wipe around. And then once you're done with all those little finishing touches, you will be done and it'll be ready for a surface decoration. So that's a slab drape bowl.